Welcome back to Developer's Diary. This is number 6, Pacts and Truces. Welcome again to the lead designer, Morten Monk. And
Greetings.
greetings, I'm Global War 36 enthusiast. So today we'll be talking about chapter 6 in the rulebook about pacts and truces. And one of the first things I noticed is that in 6.2, you made it very clear that once you terminate a pact, you can't re-sign it again. I know that there had been some concern in version 3 that you could make a non-aggression pact, say with the Chinese, and move some units around, and then break the pact, and then re-sign the pact again, and move some units together. So I really like that you got rid of those shenanigans. Was that from playtesting, or was that because you just heard people were doing it and had never even thought to do it yourself?
Well, I had the luxury of playing with players that typically um, behave, sort of, more to speak.
Right.
So they don't uh, they don't push the limits of the rule book. But I've heard many people and YouTube games where has been done. So it's just one of the clarifications that went into B4 to correct these types of, what did you call them? Shenanigans.
Shenanigans.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, I never even thought of that. And then when someone did it, I was like, is that legal? And I looked in version 3 and there wasn't anything, it's the old rule about if there's no rule saying you can't do it, then let's talk about that for a second, because there was a recent debate on Discord about what the default setting is. If I was saying that if the rules don't allow you to do it, then you can't do it. It's what General Hand Grenade called his Romulan warbird theory. Is that correct? That we need the rules to say that you can do something, otherwise the default is you cannot do it.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
Okay.
a good example of this is, can you bring a spaceship into the game from your Star Wars collection? And the
Right.
answer is no, because it's not in the rules.
Right.
So we have to, yeah, we have to stop this creative thinking. So if it's in the rules, it's allowed, and if it's not in the rules, then no, you can't do it.
Yeah. Well, the main thing that we're going to talk about today, the heart of the chapter 6, is Molotov-Ribbentrop. And I just wondered if you wanted to give us some background on. I know you had told me this took a lot of iterations, that there was a lot of work and revisions with work making Molotov-Ribbentrop work in the game. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so let's begin from the beginning in version 3. Um, I think the the best players typically didn't sign the pact because it was not worth it, for various reasons. So that was an issue. So either we had to correct it, or we had to get rid of the pact from the game, because we don't want elements in the game that is not worth doing. That's just unnecessary baggage. Um, so the pact was a big part of the Second World War, and so we wanted to keep it in. And so I think, and I think I mentioned this to you, that this was probably the element of the game that took the most work to get right. And I think we spent 4 years and multiple dozens of iterations testing this. And every time we thought, now, now we have it. Suddenly the next game, nope. My co-designer Matthias, I won't sign it. What do you mean you won't sign it? It's great. Nope, I won't sign it. So we had to go back to the drawing board, because um, in my book, he is probably one of the best players in the world. So if he says something that he won't do due to mechanics or it's I typically listen. So we went back and forth over all this, and it was actually a challenge also to get. We had to tweak the history, the
I
history
noticed
bit.
that.
For example, when is the pact available?
Turn
Um,
6 now.
so we have to move it forward a bit. Ideally, it will be moved even more forward, but then we we get too far from the actual historical accuracy. Um, and the thing is, the issue here is actually that for Germany to want to sign it, um, there are there are dozens of elements in the game that are intertwined into this pact. So let's say that we want to have um, Germany should have the option of going after Poland first. So that was the way things were. But in the game, at least in version 3, people usually went after France first.
At the same
So
time.
or at the same time, yeah. So how could we how could we make Poland a viable option to do before doing France? So when players look at the rules for Poland and the pact, they will see that we've made some tweaks that actually opens up the possibility of Germany to going after Poland first and then doing France second. And for this to work, you need to do Poland and then get back and do France. And that is actually the time that it takes to finish Poland off and then going after France. That is why Germany typically wants to do the pact as soon as possible.
Ah, so it's not that they do it simultaneously. They attack Poland, and then the next turn they move units forward towards France.
Yeah,
So maybe they attack Poland in turn 6, which would be the earliest you could
yeah,
sign the pact. And you want, if you're going to do that strategy, you want to sign the pact to lower the income increase from 2d12 to 1d12. Um, and then on turn 7, you move units towards France and you invade France on turn 8. Is that what's happening?
well, now we are touching another component in the game. We're touching the German Blitzkrieg ability. So we actually move that back a bit. So typically, Germany wants to use Blitzkrieg in France, or at least that's how most players do it. Um, but if they can't finish Poland off and move units back before the end of the Blitzkrieg ability, then the whole thing falls apart again. So for all this to work, it has to be a viable option for Germany to do things in that historical order. And a lot of the pre-war stuff or the early stuff is 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 more or less if you play 50 games, you start to notice some scripting are involved because I mean you build up towards a war. And if you look at Poland, for example, there's only so many ways that Poland can be crossed. So we did a lot of these. How can we make Poland more interesting? How can we make France more interesting? And a lot of this was actually intertwined with the pact. So, for example, we've had multiple iterations of how Poland interacts with Great Britain. When do they align? Do they align? We've tested that it was a controlled minor from the start of the game where they had recruitment rules. We've also had the ability to how can Poland transfer units to London so that the allied player would have the choice of do I stay and fight or do I transfer units and fight another day? So, for example, in the normal game, and there's a fighter in Warsaw,
Mm-hmm.
and you can actually get that out onto the into the English
Landed on a
channel.
carrier.
Yeah. So we build upon that idea and say, well, perhaps you can transfer more units. And but then we just introduced new scripting, and then Poland just moved everything back. So that was not a viable option. But I mean, in version 4, we have that Poland has a one more land zone, so it is a lot more interesting, especially for the Barbarossa going after Leningrad.
Mm-hmm.
Another big part of the pact is Finland, and Finland has also been an issue in
Difficult.
version 3 that didn't work that well. There's the Winter War expansion, which has been through multiple iterations. Hopefully, it will be fixed for this version 4. But previously, we talked about how the German player, looked at Poland and France and the Pact. And when we look at Finland, it is about how the Russian player looks, because um, both nations should want to sign the pact,
Mm-hmm.
otherwise it doesn't work. And Finland is a key component here for the Russian motivation to sign the pact. So ideally for Russia, they want Helsinki due to the strategic objectives.
Right.
Um, and you can actually separate games into two buckets, depending on how successful the Russian income increase rolls are. So if the Russian player rolls incredibly good in the income increase rolls, they have a viable option of going after Finland and
Right.
going all the way to Helsinki. Now, the Russian nightmare is conquering Helsinki, and then the German player attacks in the
Yeah,
south.
because you got all
Because
your forces way away from the front, and
yeah,
you've
yeah,
left yourself vulnerable.
yes. So that's the Russian nightmare. So do they go after Helsinki, or do they stop at Viipuri and then sign the peace treaty with the Finns?
Mm-hmm.
And this is a fun dilemma, because the German player, he really wants to catch the Russians in Helsinki,
Right.
because in the beginning of the game, the Russians typically don't have that much manpower,
Yep.
so they can really hurt the Russians if they're standing with too many units in Helsinki. Um, so this was a big part of how do we get the Russians to sign the pact.
Mm-hmm.
And in version 4, we also have Romania with Bessarabia now a separate land zone, and we mixed that into the pact as well, so that um, Russia actually has the ability to stop the wartime bonus income for Romania by going after Bessarabia.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so and they can do this without declaring war due to the sphere of influence, and that is actually interesting, because um, we've seen in various playtests that the Russians, they really took out Bessarabia with a big force. But now, then Germany counterattacked and wiped out the Russian
Mm-hmm.
main army,
Mm-hmm.
and now the rest of the front was
Wide
weakly.
open.
Yeah. So do the Russians stick their head out to bite the Germans, or do they play a more defensive role? There's also some cool concepts here. and a lot of variability. Um,
Is that about Romania, the cruel concept ideas, or is that a different section?
well, that is actually we have Finland, we
Uh
have
huh.
the income increase
Yep.
roles that are never the same. We have
Mm-hmm.
Romania, which are you can do several things there. So all this combined actually gives um, a lot of motivation for both Germany and Russia to sign the pact, but also a lot of variable games where it's. I mean, if you play 5 or 10 games, you typically have 5 to 8 different
Yeah, that's great.
scenarios.
Well,
And
I want to say a couple things. One is about the Finnish section of Molotov-Ribbentrop, and that's how clever it is that the Moscow Peace Treaty must be signed immediately upon Russia taking out Viipuri, if I'm pronouncing that correct. Is that right? That I understand that like the Russian player must make the decision right then. They can't decide later that they're going to sign the Moscow Peace Treaty. They've got to say at this moment. So I feel like that's another area where they could get caught out because at the time things were looking well and they thought they would go for Helsinki, but then they realize, uh-oh, that Germany's really massing on the border. So I love that you have to make that decision immediately. You know, you have to make the decision right then if you're gonna sign the Moscow Peace Treaty. Regarding Bessarabia, I think there's three different reasons why it's so great for Russia. First is you just waltz into Bessarabia and kill that infantry. You don't have to attack it. It's just removed from the game. And second is that annexation quirk, where Russia doesn't get to collect for captured territory before it's at war with a major power, but it can collect for annexed territory. So the Lithuanian territory and Bessarabia, at least tentatively, I know that the map might still be changed and you can't promise anything, but I think tentatively those are the two territories that you could annex and collect with. And then the third reason is what you were bringing up, that you're denying Germany its wartime bonus income as long as you're holding Bessarabia, which is why some Russian players mass in Bessarabia. Is that kind of right? Like a poking them in the eye that they don't get to collect their three? Or why would you mass a bunch of troops in Bessarabia if not to deny the plus three?
the denying of the wartime income is a lot. Yeah, is a lot to has a lot to do with it.
Mm-hmm.
And
Any
you can actually well if you stick your head out and put 10 units in Bessarabia, Germany won't get the bonus income, but then you're vulnerable to attacks. So
Is Bessarabia mountainous? Like Romania in V3 is mountainous, but is Bessarabia just clear terrain? I think Romania would be the whatever the is it Central Romania or Western Romania? I don't know what the name of that other territory is.
Bessarabia is clear terrain.
Okay, Bessarabia is clear terrain, so that makes me nervous as the Russian player to commit the 10 infantry scenario that you were bringing up. So interesting.
But
Um,
on the other hand, if you take it, you can scorch the railroads.
mm,
So there's a lot of things, and I think players will. I hope that players will, when they play the game, immediately notice that the pact and all the components are a lot better than the previous
it,
version.
it seems like in most games, the German player and Russian player would be enticed to sign the Molotov-Ribbentrop. Is that correct? Is it 80% of games, or what's a ballpark estimate?
I would say in the majority of games,
Okay.
there are some scenarios where the German player would not want the pact. Um, so I won't spill the details on that, but there are
Okay.
some scenarios where you, as a German player, would hate the Russians to get whatever you get from the pact.
Yeah.
So it's not a sure thing. Um, I hate sure things. So
Yeah, well, that's what I
uh,
like, is that I feel like it was more scripted in V3 because it did not make sense to sign the pact. Now it does, and then the question is Russia going to go for Helsinki or just take Viipuri and then sign the peace treaty? Or are you going to just take Bessarabia with, say, 1 infantry and call it quits? Or are you going to make a significant commitment? So there are some interesting decision trees, and there probably will be some variability in how people proceed on both sides of the fence. I want to compliment the change that was made to Molotov-Ribbentrop as far as when the benefits are accrued, the trade benefits. It's now at the end of the turn, simultaneous. I was very tempted to, as Germany, to sign MRP, collect my 5, and then break MRP. So that seemed very suspect and not very honorable. But now you can't do something like that. You get the tech roll for Russia, +3 for Russia, and the +5 for Germany, all at the end of the turn. And I also tip my hat that you pointed out that you can only roll for tech once in a calendar turn. Really, the only reason that rule is in there about once per calendar turn is because of Russia's +1 tech roll. In theory, they could have rolled once for their turn for, say, advanced artillery, and then at the end of the turn, if you didn't have that rule in there, they could have taken a second roll for advanced artillery. So I think that was a good catch.
Yeah, it's one of the many clarifications and policing elements that went into B4. Yeah, I've seen the German player behaving less honorable.
Badly.
Yeah, and it was a viable option in version 3. I mean, you can break a 50 any time. So it was not a nice thing to do, but you could do it.
You could do it. It was legal.
Did it. So that's why we changed it.
All right. Now, earlier you said there were a couple of other interesting wrinkles. Is there anything else you'd like to reveal about MRP? Other clever ploys? I really appreciate you talking about the Helsinki versus just stopping at Viipuri, or the Bessarabian strategy. Any other major things that you'd like to reveal about MRP? I know you like to keep things somewhat nebulous so people discover them on their own.
I think one thing is also the Finnish alignment conditions. That is also vastly changed. In version 3, it aligned with Germany when attacked, and this is changed so that it now aligns with Great Britain.
Yeah, if MRP is not signed.
Yeah, in version 3, Germany could use Finland as staging ground for an attack on Russia. Yeah, there's a lot of these subtle little details that actually has a lot of impact.
Mm-hmm.
So,
it does. I was noticing that if MRP isn't signed, then Finland can drift kind of over to the Allies, alignment camp. So that's fascinating. It seems like the Allies don't want the Germans and Russians to sign MRP, and then probably both Germany and Russia have sufficient incentives that the majority of the time it will be signed. It's funny, Morten. We thought we would only spend a very short time, but we're coming up on half an hour here. So I just want to say thank you very much. This was really another interesting topic, and I'm looking forward to doing more of these with you and starting this back up again.
Thank you.